Hello, hello, everybody. Lovely people of LinkedIn and YouTube. So, a quick notice to everybody who's watching this on LinkedIn. If you want to check past episodes and you don't want to scroll through my newsfeed, we are also streaming this to YouTube and you can find it there. I made a playlist, LinkedIn Lives, and it's very easy to go through and see all the interviews for the last probably 3 months or something. So yeah, you can find them there. But without me going into too much random rambling, today I'm joined here by Trey. And Trey, you have to unmute yourself. Welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you as a guest. And I would love to invite you that you introduce yourself a little bit to the audience before we jump into the interview.
Yeah, Mia, thanks for having me. It's good to see you again. We had a good chat a couple of months ago. And so I'm Trey Taylor. I run a family office called Threadneedle, and I do some consulting work when it comes to executive coaching and trying to prevent burnout at the executive, especially the CEO level. And I have a new book out. I think we'll talk a little bit about that as well, called A CEO Only Does Three Things. So super excited to be here with you and spend some time on my first LinkedIn Live.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you again. It's so nice when, I have guests who have done a lot of interviews, but it's their first LinkedIn Live and it's with me. Well, your introduction almost calls me to ask you, what are the three things that the CEO has to do? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, good. I'm glad you're asking because my publisher was worried that no one would ask if I named the book that. So yeah, A CEO Only Does Three Things is about culture, people, and numbers. And what I'm saying there is not that that's the only thing that a CEO has to do during the working day. Of course it isn't. It would be nice if it was. But what I am saying is that the CEO is uniquely positioned in the organization to set the agenda, the mindset, and the achievement metrics around those three things in a way that no one else can do. So that's the only place that we can focus on in order to get the results out of ourselves as CEOs that we really need to bring to the table. The subtitle of the book is Finding Your Focus in the C-Suite. And, I wrote the book to be sort of a handbook for CEOs, but what I am absolutely amazed about is CEOs from the early stages of their career, but also CEOs who have been in that job for a long time, have both groups have praised the book and said, this reminds me or teaches me in the first place what it is I'm supposed to be doing, what the job description for a CEO is.
Okay, so if, I invite you to dive a little bit into all those three areas, maybe, with some examples or like some top level stuff, like numbers. Numbers is a very broad topic, what are the main things that the CEO should be looking for when it comes to company culture. Again, a very big topic in all the different levels in the company. So what's your take from the CEO perspective? So yeah, sure. If you can dive in all three of them and really give us that top view rundown of each and of those three.
Yeah, for sure. So people often ask the question in a different way. They say, well, which is the most important one? Which one should we focus on first? And the answer is, it's like, which is your favorite kid? It doesn't matter if you actually have a favorite kid, right? You have to parent all three of them at the same time. And so it's the same thing for the CEO. You don't get to pick and choose, to work on one and not work on the other. So they all are interactive with one another. So often in the consulting practice, we will start with whatever is giving the CEO the biggest headache at that point. And so very often that is culture. And so the definition that we use, a working definition of culture, is it's the ethical water that we swim in. It's the amalgamation of the shared values of everybody in the organization, and culture shows up in the behaviors of your people. So whether you have an articulated culture or not, you still have a culture. And most CEOs, frankly, do not do enough work on grooming the culture, cultivating it, making it grow, keeping the bad things out of it. Most of us simply put it on autopilot and figure that it's some entity that can't be controlled from the center. And it's simply not true. And we've proven that with our clients times and times again, dozens of times. So that's what culture is. And culture breaks down into two different kinds of scenarios. One is the articulated culture. That's where you take the time to do an inventory and figure out what are the values that are closely held by everyone who wants to participate in the organization. What behaviors are showing up in those people on a daily basis when the manager isn't around, where the CEO isn't there to second guess your decisions? What really comes to the forefront? And those are the values. And that's the healthiest kind of culture to have, of course. The least common denominator culture, by comparison or by contrast, is that which nobody really has any say over. And it's just, the way things are done or the way things have always been done. And the interesting thing about those two culture mindsets is simply this: an articulated culture where everyone has the freedom to come in and say, this is what I want the culture to be about, versus an unarticulated culture where people simply act on their own benefit. They benefit different groups. So the first one benefits the collective as a whole, and then each individual participant benefits from being in that kind of good culture. The other benefits the individual as an individual at the expense of the collective group in general. And so, we do a lot of work with CEOs to get it right, to write out those behaviors, to demonstrate how they should be lived, to ritualize them, and all of that kind of thing. So that's the culture is sort of the operating system, is what I call it, of the business. Yeah.
No, absolutely. I mean, I absolutely share your view when I'm working with companies. Usually, the culture was not something that was actively created, and then but the culture is always created. And now the question is whether you will drive that creation and be the leader of that creation, or you might not like what will be created anyway on its own. And I like how you said that one thing is to write it down, which you can see a lot of companies have some sort of company culture, whether it's really just a few punchlines that sound good in the PR world, or maybe they have an even more elaborate essay on what my house, my rules should look like. But it's really living it and consistently reminding people and holding them to the standards of the culture. And of course, as the leader, really walking the talk, living the company culture. That's how you create it on long term. And I love how you, told that when you said it, because it's so often forgotten. They think, oh, we'll write it out, we'll send it to every employee, and then we'll just hope and pray that everybody lives up to it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love that part.
Enron is a great example of that. If you remember Enron, when you would go into their lobby in New York, they had this beautiful lobby, and they had their value statement, their mission statement, engraved in marble with gold letters on the wall. And it was a good one. And I'm sorry, I can't remember it off the top of my head, but it was a really good one. Like, they probably paid somebody a lot of money to write that, But then you would go into the business, and they could probably recite it, but it wasn't in their behaviors. It wasn't true for who they are. And that's a danger for us as well. We can put way too much effort in really perfecting the right value statements and the right ritualization and that sort of thing. But if it doesn't, at the end of the day, show up when my employee shows up, or when my partners and vendors show up, then it isn't worth the paper that it's printed on. And that's a real key, is that it has to be sincere. It has to be authentic.
Yes. I fully agree, and I love how you say that. Well, okay, this was one. We still have two more to dive in.
Yeah.
So
if culture is the why, then the who, or the how, if you will, becomes people, right? And I think that in American business, we are not necessarily playing it right. We're not getting it right when it comes to recruiting and retaining. And I'll tell you who gets it right, largely, is Hollywood. So I've really analyzed this and thought a lot about this, and this is the process that we go through in the book and in the consulting. But what we do is we try to do as much work as we can up front in writing the script of the movie that we want to see played out, the job description, before we put someone in the job. So you write the script and then you cast the movie, right? So we do a lot of work on recruiting, but then also the second part of that is retention. So what can the CEO be doing to improve recruiting and improve retention? For recruiting, one of the things that we do that people really love about the book is I don't write job offers. I don't think I'm qualified to write a job offer that entices you to come in and commit yourself fully to the business. And there's only one person who is qualified to write that, and that's you. That's the candidate who's considering the position. So what we do is we take a stack of 5 index cards. We write on the back of each index card the category of compensation, for example. So I've got the job description and it's laser focused and it's really tight. And we've gone through a series of interviews, 4, 5, 6 interviews with all kinds of people in the organization. And then I hand that to you and I say, if you're interested in taking this job, tell me what the compensation has to be to get you interested and keep you interested. And then we have people go away and come back with their own job offer. And that's something that's a very counterintuitive, but works like an absolute charm. So that's the recruiting piece. And then secondly, the retention piece. How are you as the CEO reaching out to the heart of your people to remind them of their importance to the business? And we think that is the most valuable people skill that a CEO can have to keep people engaged, to keep them functioning at the highest level. And I have a lot of tips and tricks in the book about how you retain people. So that's the people, that's the how that we get the culture to come into existence.
I love that. I absolutely love that. I see so many CEOs who, once they become a bigger company, they shut themselves in the CEO's office. They talk with just the C-level leaders. They never go and shake hands and have a coffee here, coffee there, just mingle. And there's so much value in that workforce that nobody's tapping into. I mean, one of the things when I start working with bigger companies is I always start with the due diligence. Part of that due diligence is interviews with a whole bunch of people, employees on all different levels, departments, and so on. And you know what, Trey? I think at least 50% of what I present as my findings and suggestions comes from those people. And I'm not hiding it. It's not like, ooh, I came up with it. I tell them, like, if you would just spend some time talking to your employees, they would hand you all of this on a silver platter. So I absolutely love that CEO can do so much because it's that figure of authority. And if they are more human, people will definitely feel more connected to the company.
Absolutely the case. And, there's a whole management practice called management by walking around, that sort of thing. And we encourage CEOs to do that. We give homework around it. We want CEOs to take random people to lunch and to have one conversation at lunch, which is, what do you know about the company that you don't think I know? And then you shut up and you let them tell you. You don't comment on it. You don't say, no, that's incorrect or anything of that nature, because the literal accuracy of what the employee is saying is not the important part of it, right? It's the perception of what they have of the company that gives you the opportunity to improve the company as a whole. So we do a lot of coaching around that. And it's actually a good segue into the numbers section, because we take a very different spin on numbers.
Well, just before you go into the numbers, I would love to add one little detail that I suggest to CEOs is when you do talk to employees and they tell you, make sure that after a day or two, you follow up with them. I think that's so important. Great because point. If they tell you, but they don't feel heard, because, you listen, but then you don't do anything with that, even if you don't accept any of what they said, and you come back and say, hey, great ideas, we don't have the budget, great ideas, not the right time now, we will have that in the back of our, like, whatever, but so that they feel that you actually took what they told you in consideration, you did a little bit of thinking, you come back with feedback. Otherwise, what happens is people start sharing feedback, but because there's no feedback back from the management, they just say, you know what the F? I mean, nobody's
What's the
listening
point?
to me
Right.
anyway.
Yep.
So they start not sharing their opinions and views and suggestions anymore. But yeah, sorry, had to add that little bit in, but
No, I think it's
please.
great. It's great. And what you're describing there obviously is a feedback loop, right? And it needs to loop. And we forget that a lot of times. We think that asking the question is enough and not completing that feedback loop. So the segue into numbers, then numbers become those things that we can prove to the world that our ideas are correct. So our ideas about culture, our ideas about our product, our ideas about our people, how do we know that those things are real and they are working? Well, numbers are the way that we do that. And we advocate an extremely transparent organization, almost painfully so. And the reason is exactly what you were talking about, Mia, is if I go to the front line, if it's a manufacturing facility or a service call center or something of that nature, and I listen to what they will tell me, and I have to ask the questions in the right way, I have to be respectful of the answers, that kind of thing, then I will hear absolutely business transforming problems being solved on the front line all day long. There's a great example in the book. It wasn't me, but it was a friend of mine who consulted with a large carpet mill. And the carpet mill had, some machinery that was installed in the 60s. And then in the early 2000s, that machinery had been upgraded to the next generation of machinery. And they were running these carpet mills, and every 8 hours, they would shut it down for 4 hours. And that was just in the handbook, and that's just what had to happen. And so as the consultant was walking around and saying, hey, why do you close these machines down for 4 hours a day? The old foreman said, well, these machines don't need to be closed down 4 hours a day. The old ones did. But because we used to do it that way and nobody ever told us to stop, we still do it that way. They were losing 12 hours, of production, 8 to 12 hours of production time a day with this very expensive machinery that didn't need to be cooled down in the same way. And nobody ever thought to ask anybody on the front line what to do about it. And so they recaptured tens of millions of dollars of productive time by making one change, and it only took a consultant to ask one question. So it's my proposition that the CEO's job is to set the agenda when it comes to numbers, but then also to be extremely transparent and dig into the details of those numbers. And then the third piece of my model there is to give away a lot of that money. Now, you can give it away in forms of compensation, you can give it away in forms of charity and those kinds of things, but we should all be in a mission together that after we have a transparent conversation, we know how much money's left on the bottom line, and then we know where that money goes. That brings cohesiveness to a team that we can really achieve some great things.
I couldn't agree more with you. I mean, transparency, authenticity, all of that are very high on my personal value ladder. And it's something that I advocate all the time, that, everybody should be in the loop, maybe not in details, but, they should have the picture, because when you lead with transparency, it's so much easier to get your message across, whether it's good or bad. I see a lot of times CEOs use the numbers only when they're bad because they want to get their agenda through. But then when the numbers become better, then suddenly nobody talks about the numbers and things like that. But I'm a huge advocate of that full authenticity, transparency.
One of the things that we have to do a lot of times, and this was a shock to me that I learned, in my own experience, is, my understanding of financial matters is here because it has to be. Like, I can't run a business. I can't plan 3 generations in the future for the business and those kinds of things if I don't have very good financial acumen. The people that work for me may not have that same experience. They may not have ever needed to. But when I come in and I say, we have to hit EBITDA numbers and we must hit gross margin contribution by, and if I use all those buzzwords and simply assume that they know what I'm talking about without educating them to the same level of understanding that I do, then we don't have a peer relationship where we can both make good decisions for the company. And so one of the tricks, like you said, when you come into a company, you do some interviews. We do that as well. We survey as a requirement. We survey every single W-2 and core 1099 in the business. And if the client's not willing to do that with us, then we can't work with that client. The other thing that we do is in that survey, we put 2 math questions to gauge the financial acumen of those people working in the business. And one of them is a margin contribution question, is how much we bring a dollar in the door, how much do we keep at the end of the day when we've spent all the money? And we have some very wild answers. Sometimes it's 96%, and sometimes it's 5 cents or something like that. Never once have we gotten the correct answer, which is interesting, but it gives us a gauge of how sophisticated people in the company are about spending money. And one of the high points for me is we did this in a client of mine, and the sales team had usually come in to say, we need to spend $50,000 on this marketing or sales or sponsorship or something of that nature. And we taught the CEO to begin to ask, that's good. If we spend that, what's the return? And typically in the first year, the answer was, if we spend 50, then we're going to make 50. We're going to make our money back, right? But that was a misunderstanding of how margin works, and dollars are not the same dollars. And so now I get emails from time to time from people in that group where they say, we asked for 50,000 because we can produce 300,000. And because of our margin contribution, that's a $50,000 contribution to profit. That's a sophisticated way for people to act. And that's happening all the way down to the sort of receptionist level in that company. And that's something I'm particularly proud of.
No, yeah, you definitely have something to be proud of, because financial literature is not something that we are taught as kids. We are not taught about that in schools. I mean, if you don't go to a business school, which most employees don't go to.
Right.
So it's not like a general knowledge thing, and there's a lot of misunderstanding around that. So I think that's a really, really good breakthrough that you've created in that company.
Really great.
Trey, it was really interesting to hear, your perspective on these 3 topics. There was one more thing that caught my attention in your introduction, and you were talking about burnout. We all know burnout. We've all been through some sort of burnout, big, small. I know that there's a whole lot of people in my audience who are experiencing on a regular basis or who had some major experience. So I think it's really something worth talking about and just being open to talk about it, because it's often hidden under the rug. So can you give us a little bit of an idea, what you talk when you talk about burnout, and maybe some ideas for fellow entrepreneurs, maybe some simple things that you use in your daily life to prevent burnout from happening?
Yeah. So my definition of burnout goes to the idea that, as emotional people, right, creatures, we have a reserve, an emotional reserve of energy that we can pull on to get through times that don't look exactly like we wish they looked. So I want to lay on the beach every day with a nice drink in my hand and my wife and my kids playing. That's a great day for me. I'm going to build up a lot of emotional reserve when I have that. Unfortunately, my day usually is, in the inbox, and someone's unhappy with this person and I have to step in and fix it, or something of that nature. Some strife and stress comes in. And every time I have to encounter those things, I have to take the energy that I keep inside of me and I have to spend it on those things. Burnout literally is when I have burnt through all of that fuel and I have nothing left. And then I have to go into my reserve tanks, and my reserve tanks are where I am able to do kind and loving things for my family, for myself, and I can live a higher purpose. It is very interesting and very obvious to me now, having done this work for so long, that we burn emotional fuel when we work off purpose. Each person has a different purpose for sure. So if I am not supposed to be a salesperson, but I got trapped into the career, or no one else is doing it right in my business and I have to go and do that work, I am capable of doing that work. But if that's not who I want to be and that's not my purpose on earth, every single time I turn to it, I'm going to burn down that emotional fuel. And so how do we prevent burnout? Number one is we get people focused on the things that they are supposed to be doing, and ideally the things that they can do and no one else can do, because that's the most valued and valuable work in an organization. So when we're working with executives, we put them back on purpose. For CEOs, the biggest challenge, and you know this is as well, if not better than I do, is to get them working on the things they're supposed to be working on and not working on the things that they should have delegated or already have delegated, right? The secret to scaling business is to get everybody doing the work that they're supposed to do and no one doing the work of someone else. And that's what we really work on a lot, is getting executives to say to their employees, I'm interested that you brought me this problem. I'm interested to see how you're going to solve it, and then sit back and say nothing else. And let them fail if they have to fail. Let them succeed where they can succeed, and let them learn the lessons that they need to learn, because that's how you build capable executives and support staff over the long period of time. In contrast, what do we really do? No, that's not how you do it. Let me take you and I'll show you. And I'll show you this time, and I'll show you next time, and next time, and next time. And then eventually what happens is everybody in the organization is allowed to put an item on your to-do list as the CEO. And so you don't have time to get to culture, to get to people, and to get to numbers, because you're doing jobs that you're paying everybody else to do. And that's when burnout sets in and is a terrible thing. It's a real sort of virus on American business, where, you know, those CEOs go home and they have unhappy home lives because they have unhappy work lives. And I think that by solving that, by really targeting that, we can make a good positive impact in the universe.
Yeah, I and it's not just, you know, American businesses. It's happening everywhere. I mean, I'm from Europe. I do a lot still in Europe, even with my coaching, same thing. And I mean, this might seem a little woo-woo to people, and, you know, sometimes I get strange looks when I'm talking about this, but isn't it funny how we entrepreneurs, how we are so good at selling ourselves crazy stories? We have to do this, we have to do that. Nobody's forcing you to do anything. Nobody's holding a gun on your head telling you you have to, you know, do this, or you have to be in this business, or whatever. It's really the stories that we sell to ourselves.
Great.
I sometimes invite them, you know, to use the trash can method, where really they write out the bullshit stories that they're telling themselves, and then just throw them in the trash can or burn them up. And but yeah, so many times we put ourselves into this. You have to do this, you have to do that, you have to be in this business. No, you don't have to do shit. You have to die. You have to pay the taxes. And is there a third? You have to?
No, those are the only two. Yeah. Eat,
yeah.
Right. To stay alive, you have to eat.
Yeah.
And I love your point here. And the exercise that I use often, if I've got a CEO who's just not getting it, is I say, look, what would happen if we substituted I have to with I choose to? How much of that would you continue to choose to do? And it's like this light bulb moment for some folks that they say, I wouldn't choose to do any of this stuff. I have to do it. So then I say, okay, now we can start working on delegation and getting it into the hands of people. And sometimes you don't have those people. And that becomes the task, is not to do the work, but to hire the person to do the work. And sometimes that means firing somebody who isn't doing the work, and sometimes it means moving people around. And those are hard things to do. But what executives need to know, and I really stress this to CEOs, there's only one of you for your entire life. So if we burn you out early, we don't get another shot at another guy coming in or another lady coming in and doing the same kinds of things. We need you to do what you're really good at. And when you burn yourself out, we don't get access to that. It's a bad deal.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, Trey. Well, Trey, it's so lovely talking to you. And I have a feeling that you and we could go on and on and on for another hour or so, but we have to be mindful of, the time for the interview. I do want to ask you two more things before we say goodbye. So number one thing, who should reach out to you, and what's the best way, if they're watching this interview and they say, hey, I love what Trey is saying, I want to connect with him. What's the best way to reach out to you, and who do you normally serve?
Yeah, we work with mid-market companies, and the best definition for mid-market is not necessarily employee count or revenue size. For me, it's, how much of a built-out C-suite do you have? So we love working with companies that have COOs, CEOs, and CFOs. If you have those three titles in place and you're still feeling stuck, or you're still feeling like we should be getting more out of what we are putting in, then we tend to be very good assets to add there. And so that's the typical client. We can work across industries, and we have done. We work in technology companies, we work in insurance, we work in real estate companies quite a bit, and we have some subject matter knowledge there. But any company really, with that mid-market size and the focus is a good client for us. And you can email me at Trey, Trey, at trinity-blue.com. And you can find the website at www.trinity-blue.com.
Perfect. Well, my last question is really a universal one. I always ask all my guests this question, and it can be, regarding what we talked so far, or just general, whatever you feel is that last golden nugget of wisdom that you want to leave the audience with.
Well, sure. Of course, I would say you should definitely go to Amazon and buy A CEO Only Does Three Things. You should also sign up for my newsletter, which is plantyourflag.live. But in beyond those things, and I'm just making a joke there, Mia, but beyond those things, I think CEOs need to look in the mirror and take a certain inventory. They are often so hard on themselves and grant themselves no grace whatsoever. And CEOs need to look back and be proud of what they have accomplished, and be proud of who they are, that they would want others to succeed through the mechanism of the company. And, we need to give ourselves a break, because no one's going to step in and do it for us. There is no one coming to save us, to say, hey, you take the day off and feel good about the work that you've done. There is no award that they give the CEO inside the business. It's always the opposite, the CEO giving other people the award. So that's a discipline that I make sure that the CEOs that I work with take time to appreciate inside of a gratitude journal, their own efforts towards the betterment of the company and the people that work there.
I love that. I mean, last week, we were talking with Sarah about how we tend to go into the negatives, what was bad, what we didn't do, what the failures, but we so rarely think about the wins, the things that we're grateful for. Actually, one thing that I make mandatory for all the CEOs that I work with is, at the end of the day, they need to find even the smallest win of the day and celebrate it. It doesn't have to be a huge hoopla that they make. It might be just, having a glass of wine with their wife or whatever, just, but they have to I focus them that there are wins, and they need to appreciate the things that they did do, that they did overcome, and so on. But yeah, it's so natural for us to go the other way.
Absolutely, it is. Yeah.
Trey, again, it was a pleasure having you as a guest. It was a pleasure talking to you. I love what you do, and I love what you brought to the interview, the insights, the knowledge. Thank you so much for that. I wish you nothing but all the best on your journey, and I'm really looking forward to us having another conversation someday in the future.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks so much for having me, and thanks to the audience for tuning in and listening for so long.
Take care, Trey. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Okay. So this was Trey. And yeah, really, really important topic for all the CEOs and C-level leaders out there. Everything that we talked about, the company culture, people, numbers, relationship, especially the relationship with ourselves, looking in the mirror, celebrating the wins, preventing the burnout. So all amazing topics. And yes, if this interview, if what Trey and I talked about resonated with you, make sure to check him out. You can easily find him on LinkedIn. You can send him a connection request, have a chat with him. You can check out his book. You can check out his website, and all the other resources. If you're watching this on LinkedIn, then Trey is tagged at the top of this post, and you can just click his name and you will go straight to his profile. If you're watching on YouTube, then really just Google Trey, and I'm sure he will pop up as one of the first searches. Other than that, I hope everybody is fine. Happy Monday, everybody. I wish you all a great week. I hope you're all fine, healthy, safe throughout this craziness that's still going on in the world. And yeah, I welcome you to join us again next Monday, another great interview. And yeah, let's just keep on going with these interviews and bringing all the value for you to learn from and to think about things. So yeah, have fun, everybody. Enjoy the week, and see you next Monday. Bye.